I've been through heartaches, I've been to heaven. I've done my best and my worst, learned my lessons. No matter how hard my life would treat me, I'd always get right back up, never worry. 'Cause I got a million reasons to keep holding on. Yeah, I got all that it takes to win and overcome. What I got is just a feeling, but it's oh so strong. It goes on and on, on and on. There's something going on inside of me. I feel it growing stronger every beat. I never just believe in what I see, 'cause I can feel the energy. I've been trying to go the other way, but I can't seem to get you out of my head, out of my head. I've been fighting everything you'll be, 'cause everything you'll be is changing me, and I can't seem to get you out of my head, out of my head. I got time for you, I got time for you, so be mine. Would you give me time to give it all to you, give it all to you? Let me give it all to you, give it all to you, yeah. Let me give it all to you. Let me give it all to you.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Building Foundations of Trust, Safety and Confidence with Natalie Light. Now, Natalie is an Association for the Study of Animal Behaviour accredited certified clinical animal behaviourist, an Animal Behaviour and Training Council registered clinical animal behaviourist and training instructor, as well as being a full member of both the Association of Pet Behaviour Counsellors and the Fellowship of Animal Behaviour Clinicians. Now, Natalie believes that by focusing on the dog and human relationship and encouraging effective and appropriate communication, we can live with our dogs more successfully. So if this is your first time on a webinar with us, let me just tell you a little bit about the Dog Training College and what it is that we do. So we've helped transform over 16,000 people from 27 countries, their dog training and behaviour knowledge through our accredited courses and instructor training. We have over 1,000 Trustpilot reviews, and all of our approved dog trainers are vetted, monitored and reviewed. This webinar will be up and available on the Inner Circle for unlimited pass holders and monthly members to watch on demand. Verified certificates are also available for tonight's webinar, and information on how to become a member and verified certificates will be up on the screen once we have finished tonight. If you have any questions throughout as we go along for Natalie, please do feel free to pop them in the chat box and I will collate them. And at the end, I will come back and we will put your questions over to Natalie. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel to be notified of our weekly free webinars and more as well. So let's get Natalie on. Hi, Natalie. Are you all right? Can you hear me? I think I muted myself.
I had unmuted, but I've yeah.
Me.
Can you hear me okay now?
I can.
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm a bit cold.
Me and Tony was just saying that as well. Freezing.
Yeah, I've got a heater pointed at my feet, so I'm sorry. I hope it doesn't interfere with my big loud voice too much.
No, we can hear you perfectly. So I will hand it over to you and I will see you at the end.
Fab. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so hopefully everyone can now see my screen. I can't see any of you or hear any of you, so I do apologise. But I know that there are lots of you there. I was just nosing at the chat as I was dancing along to the music before we came on. So hello to everyone. I'm really looking forward to this and hearing your questions. So what I want to do today is go through a few theoretical concepts about trauma in dogs. I then want to use Drax, my lovely wolfhound, as a case study of how we can create foundations of trust, safety and confidence and then also feed into the kind of key components that I think are essential for these dogs to be able to live a successful and happy life. So I'm going to whiz through quite a lot today. I've got a few videos to show you as well. Fingers crossed they work. You never know with technology. But what I want to try and do is get through my slides so that you guys have an opportunity to ask questions, and hopefully there will be some interesting questions. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nat. I run a behaviour business down in the south of Hampshire. Do you remember what spring looks like? And if you don't, there you go, have some green on your screens. Everything's very bleak. This is my least favourite time of year. But, you know, a month or so and we'll see some more colour coming into our wider environment. So I've got 5 dogs at the moment. Jack is the old man Jack, down the bottom, the black and tan collie. My 2 little terriers, Fish and Mouse. My lovely lanky lurcher, Gru. And then the new boy, well, not so new now. We've had him about 18 months. Drax, who is an Irish wolfhound, and I'll tell you a bit more about him later. I also do teaching at Winchester University. I get involved in a lot of consultancy projects. So I'm really lucky to have quite a wide portfolio of work. And I really just enjoy talking to people about behaviour, particularly canine behaviour. So it's good to have so many of you here to share some of my thoughts and research today. So let's start with some of the concepts that can really affect the welfare of some dogs. I'm going to focus specifically on trauma, and it's a kind of new-ish area, an emotional trauma that is really of interest to those individuals within the kind of behaviour sector that have either lived or worked with some of these dogs, and you can sometimes see more than just fear. Okay, so I thought it would be useful to just go through some of the concepts from human psychology, because there's really only a handful of people looking at this in dogs, Dr. Frank Macmillan being one of them. So if you haven't heard of him, then do look him up. But basically, we can define trauma as a severe emotional shock and pain caused by an extremely upsetting experience. Now, we all know that labels aren't particularly helpful, and we need to explain what we mean by these terms rather than just adding new terminology that can be confusing. And so I'm going to try and dig into that a little bit deeper, and that it's worthwhile remembering that there are different types of trauma. So when we generally think about trauma, we might think about a traumatic event. So that would be acute trauma. Something happens, you know, you are in a car crash, you're worried about driving afterwards. But often we see cases where the trauma is complex, so it has lots of different factors, causes, and triggers. It can be chronic, particularly for dogs, let's say street dogs that are way into adulthood, or ex-breeding bitches, for example, depending on the situations that they've been kept in. And the one that is probably kind of the highest concern, and is maybe highest frequency within companion animal training, is this developmental trauma. So we're really thinking about dogs that are from puppy farms in that stage. Okay, in human psychology, we would describe developmental trauma or the causes of more complex or chronic trauma as being caused by an ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences. So something that happens to you during a a sensitive phase of development can really affect how your emotional and cognitive abilities develop and how you are as an adult. And it's important to remember that emotional, behavioural and cognitive problems that persist long after the traumatic event is over is a way of kind of describing this trauma. And part of what I really feel passionately about this work is getting people to understand the longevity and how long it might actually take and why it takes so long for things to improve with a dog that may have gone through trauma. And we can use human examples to try and build some kind of empathy and comparison to that with our clients or ourselves. So why does human trauma help us and the research? Because it gives us a better understanding. Within standard training and behaviour work, we might use things like fear or anxiety or learned helplessness. But actually, some of those can actually miss a whole area of research that could be really useful for us in practice. And the research into human psychological trauma is pretty vast, and we can pick some of that up and adapt it to help dogs that might be in the same sort of situation. The main things that I would like animal behaviour clinicians to be aware of so that they can pass it on to their clients is to understand and appreciate the long-lasting neurological, behavioural and emotional effects of trauma, to structure our treatment plans using key concepts of trauma recovery research from human psychology. We're likely to see an increase in client compliance if we're able to explain things in a slightly different way. And of course, all of our ultimate goals is to inform and improve animal welfare. So that's why I think it's quite important for us to be well read in some of these non-human animal psychology kind of terms, but also be able to bring in some of the trauma research. So I'm going to give you a real quick tour around some of the research. I am not a trauma expert by any means, but I really want this to just sort of pique your interest a little bit so that you can go and do some further reading if you want to. Hopefully most of you are aware of the standard welfare assessment tools that we would use for companion animals. So we've got the 5 freedoms, which form part of the Animal Welfare Act and allow us to kind of put legislation together that really sets out what is poor welfare. So if an animal is not within a suitable environment, doesn't have a suitable diet, isn't able to exhibit normal behaviour patterns, is not housed appropriately and is not protected from pain, suffering, injury and disease, we can say that that's poor welfare practice. What I like to think about as well is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because these two concepts and these welfare assessment tools really need to go hand in hand so that we're not missing the very bottom of this pyramid, the physiological needs and the safety needs. A lot of the time we can skip those steps and then we end up with a bit of a wobbly pyramid with not very good foundations. And hopefully over the next hour or so, I'm going to show you examples of why that bottom base of the pyramid is so important and how you're going to become unstuck if you don't focus on that in the early stages. I'm not going to talk a lot about this here because it's a huge area of research, but do have a look into Deb Danner's work if you're interested in this. The polyvagal theory really explains different concepts in terms of physiology and emotional safety. So the simple way of putting it is you can be in three different states. You can be ventral, which means you are socially engaged, you feel safe, you are secure. You can be sympathetic, and that's where our fight and flight comes in, which some of you may be aware of already. And we look at, you know, the kind of stress systems and trying to find safety by mobilizing yourself and removing yourself from something you find aversive. I think a lot of the kind of fear and anxiety labels end there when it comes to working with dogs and other non-human animals. Not saying that's the case all over the place, but actually by delving a little bit deeper, it can give us an explanation as to what's going on with these dogs that are seemingly shut down. We might label them as having learned helplessness, and the kind of dorsal shutdown, feeling disconnected or numb. They feel that their life is being threatened, and it's a state of immobilization. Can be really useful to explain why some of the kind of standard positive reinforcement or counter conditioning desensitization protocols may not be enough and may not be working in some of these cases where a dog has experienced trauma. So when we think about what trauma may look like in dogs, you know, if I ask you to all picture in your mind a dog that may have undergone trauma, you're probably going to come up with something similar. It's likely to have been on an RSPCA advert or something like Poor Drax looking here. And here's just a really simple list of some of those things that you might be able to pick up on to kind of work towards a slightly different plan as you may otherwise. So anorexia, pacing and hypervigilance, insomnia, so inability to sleep, extreme fear and a very sensitive startle response, probably no play at all in their behavioural repertoire or their daily routine, apathy, irritability or aggression. They could be in physical pain because of particular medical issues as well as emotional ones. They could be exhibiting compulsive or repetitive behaviours such as pacing before, but also licking. They might have issues like you can see with Drax there, this kind of dermatitis and acral licking of the paws is a very common kind of stress signal. Panic, so on sight of humans or other dogs. And also if you've got a known history where you know there was neglect, abuse or lack of appropriate socialization, you might be able to infer that some form of developmental trauma has taken place. So again, going back to the human psychology, the treatment and recovery plans are slightly more involved than a simple DSCC plan, so a desensitization counter conditioning plan. And I really like this quote. It just explains how clinicians in human psychology have kind of built this framework of how they help people through trauma. And it says, clinicians have learned to focus on issues of safety, affect regulation, so that's your ability to control your emotions, coping and self-management skills, as well as on the therapeutic relationship itself. So the key elements of trauma treatment are that the dog or the human has control, they have a predictable environment, and they are able to moderate the timing, duration, and intensity of experiences. So they're able to remove themselves if they need to. So it comes back to choice as well. This is just a really simple diagram of where we end up with. And I know some people aren't that keen on this word resilience, but hopefully you kind of understand what I mean by it. We're either vulnerable or we can cope with stress. And what will happen in a situation where the environment is unpredictable, and exposure to things that are fear-inducing is severe and prolonged, then you will end up vulnerable to stress. However, you're more likely to be resilient and able to cope with that stress if your environment is predictable, your exposure to those triggers, whatever they might be, is moderate and controlled. This is a really busy slide, so I don't expect you to be able to read through all of this. But again, it's taken from human psychology, and it's basically advice to people that are dealing on a day-to-day basis of humans that have been through trauma. So this is a 70-30 campaign. It basically describes something called a sanctuary model, where let's say vulnerable or at-risk children are coming to a day centre, for example, to undergo some just normal childhood experiences with staff. This is the kind of training that the staff would be given, and I think it lends itself really well to working with dogs that have been traumatized, have experienced trauma. So creating a trauma-informed environment means that you are providing these 5 key principles: safety, trust, choice, collaboration between everyone that's involved, and empowerment. Okay? And they, for me, are that massive foundation that we need to build on before we even consider doing things like a DSCC or a positive reinforcement program. So let's talk about DRACS for a bit. Hopefully that was a useful introduction. I'm just going to check the time, see where I am. Yeah, I'm okay for time. So poor old DRACS came to us in August 2019. You know what it's like, you're looking on Facebook and someone tags you somewhere, and he had been brought over from Ireland. I literally know nothing. I have tried to dig and dig and dig about his history, but I've gleaned some stuff from observing him and getting to know him over the last 18 months, but I'll never know really the truth. But it's likely that he had a very stressful transportation, because he'd pretty much never been on collar and lead. So it was kind of double slip lead and drag him to the van, drive him over from Ireland. He ended up at Many Tears. Then he was in a kennel environment, and then transported to our house eventually, once we were able to adopt him. He was very withdrawn. He was panting. There was minimal movement around the kennel. You'll see a video shortly, if it works, hopefully. He would be sat in corners, very little exploratory behaviour, which we would hope to see in a 10-month-old puppy. So if we go back to that a polyvagal theory, we could describe him as dorsal vagal. He's given up. Okay, he's not able to even do the fight and flight physiological responses. So here's a little video of him. It was playing a bit jerkily before, but I think that looks okay. So this is pretty much his existence. So you can see the breathing rate. Also, his physical condition is very poor, malnourished, bad skin issues, not engaging with people or other dogs particularly, and really trying to shrink himself down as best he can, which is quite difficult for a wolfhound, bless him. So these kind of images and pictures and videos are just absolutely harrowing, and he is one of thousands of dogs that are living in our world experiencing it like this, which is why I'm so passionate about getting these messages across about trauma-informed environments. So that's enough of a miserable DRACS. So the next few slides are going to be about the very early days. I've done quite a few webinars about DRACS, and I've kind of put them in a bit of a series because we're always making progress. This is going way back to the beginning, just to give you a flavour of what we did and how we prepared for him. So my aim was to provide Drax with a trauma-informed environment. Okay, I had really low expectations on the time scale it was going to take. You know, we didn't book a table in December for us all to go out for a family meal and him to come with us. It was literally, let's just see how it goes. Because I had the 4 other dogs, I wanted to get them used to the routine, because it meant playing musical dogs slightly, because I was going to change Jack's room into Drax's room. So I did that in as much advance as I could, once we knew we were definitely getting him. So we had probably a couple of weeks where we had the new routine and the dogs getting used to where they were fed instead. We had a plan for how we're actually going to get this huge dog from the van, once we've picked him up from Wales, into our house safely. And we set up lots of dog cams so that I can observe his behaviour without being there as a scary presence, because we knew that he didn't find people comforting. But I also wanted to be able to know if he's been out to the toilet, has he explored his room, how much is he sleeping? And so dog cams are brilliant for that. We sent Drax a big package of things that we'd all worn and rubbed our dogs all over. And I got the vet and the insurance company all sorted. So we were ready to go as soon as he arrived. This is just a very crude plan of my house. I don't live in a particularly big house. We're very lucky to have a very large garden. And you'll see videos in a bit of how, well, it's basically mud at the moment. But anyway, now people often ask me, oh, what would you do with a dog that doesn't have the setup Drax has? And, I am 100% honest here. I would not have even applied for him if our house and garden was not set up for him to live a life where he possibly may not get off the property. And the way I did that is, he's got a room at the front here, which is like the garage. It would have been the garage. It's been converted into a room. And we put in a back door. So there's access out to a toilet area. It's just like the alleyway between the 2 houses. It's nothing flash, but it just means that he's got an outdoor area where it's not a thoroughfare through the house. And also, being in his own room, we're not constantly walking past and bothering him. The garden is large enough that he can get up to full speed galumph. So, you know, if he never got off the property, he would still be able to get enough exercise. And that was really important in deciding whether it was fair on him for us to have him. So my initial priorities were for him to get loads of sleep, for him to feel safe, to get him fed up and getting some decent nutrition, because a giant breed at 10 months old that had probably been malnourished is a recipe for disaster in older life. So, you know, joint supplements, decent food, all that stuff was really important to start with. And then just observing. I am a behavior observation geek, as those of you that know me out there will definitely say that is the truth. I love just watching. I think that's how you get to know your dogs and a lot of other situations very well. So what I'm looking for when I'm observing is any behavior, bearing in mind there might not be much going on. I want to see whether his body condition is improving. I want to see his reaction to people, dogs, and the environment. Is he putting himself forward, or is he retreating? Very much he was kind of neutral to the environment. He would move towards dogs and away from people. So they were the kind of initial things that taught me some stuff about Drax. So when he first came, we left him in his room. These are stills from my dog cam. So this is the size room he's got. It's, you know, it's nothing flash, but it's his own space. And he pretty much slept the whole weekend when we picked him up. And that's why I love dog cams, because I was obviously worried having a new dog. I didn't know how he was going to settle in. I didn't know if he'd be pacing around and stressed. But the last thing I wanted to do is keep poking my head round, because I don't want to become the scary lady that keeps disturbing me. So we sat down in the lounge, as we always do in the evening, with all of the other dogs, and we put the dog cam up in the corner on the telly. So we had a live Drax feed, and I was just able to keep an eye on him, that he was happy and sleeping. He had his own space. It was warm. I put all the blinds down so he didn't have to worry about anything going on, and just a bit of a radio on to block out some noise. And things changed quite quickly, really. So we adopted him in August. So this is February here. That's the first time he went upside down on his bed there. So he's starting to relax in his own space. So hopefully I've put forward the idea that safety is really important, but how do we create safety? Easy. We have a predictable routine. And by that, I don't mean you feed them every day at 5. I mean, that can be part of your predictable routine. But things like, whenever I opened the back door for him to go out into the yard, I would walk through the room, give him a treat on his bed, open the door, turn around, give him another treat on his bed, and leave. That was the way I opened the back door. Not only does that mean, oh, lady gives me food, it means that he knows what's happening every time I come in. What may have spooked him and would have eroded some of that feeling of safety is if I opened the door from the outside one day. He can cope with that now, but in the early days, I just wanted to be really consistent with what I was doing. He had regular opportunities to explore the house and the garden where it was safe. He had his own space. There's no traffic. So often we see these cases where the poor dog is not getting enough sleep, and it's because they've got a crate right in the middle of where everyone's walking past all the time. So sometimes just rearranging some beds or, dog furniture can really help. The biggest point on safety is that feeding, resting, toilet trips, or exploring are not contingent on interactions. A lot of people fall into the trap of trying to encourage the dog to them and being part of all of the kind of explorative behaviours that they start to exhibit as they feel safe, and that just puts them back. Okay, so he didn't have to interact with us. There was no pressure whatsoever. Nutrition, he was very underweight, so I was feeding him smaller meals because I didn't know what might upset his tummy. Just kept an eye on him. He had food every time we went into the room, as I've described. He had chews but not puzzles. Again, if we fall into the trap of thinking that stressed dogs need something to do, and we give him a really tricky frozen Kong, it's just not going to help. Have it for free. It's fine. Look how easy this is. Now he can cope with more difficult puzzles, but in the beginning, it's just like, there you go, there's a sausage. We introduce new foods gradually, as you would with any puppy, any new dog. So this is the setup we had that I talked about earlier. So it was lovely and warm, so all the doors are open. Do you remember those days? I can't wait. And I'm not wearing 10 jumpers, which is another sign. So we just sat and went about our lives as normal, just keeping an eye on him on one of the tellies. So invest in some tech, definitely. What I would miss is things like this picture here. So that's his little room. This is one of the opportunities for him to explore. So doors are just left open. We're all in the lounge, which is through that closed door. And I wouldn't know this happened if I hadn't, you're counting on looking over at the exact time he's looking through the window. But actually, because I'm in the kitchen with him on the app, with the hallway camera, I can see that this happened. And again, that's a positive step. And I can see that things are improving. He's coming out of his safe place of his own accord. And we used to do nighttime treasure, which is this bottom right here, because he felt safer once everyone was tucked up in bed. He can explore without any potential disturbance. So I would leave him loads of treasure to come out, and I could watch him on the camera. And that he would sometimes look straight at the camera and think, why is she watching me? But all of that observation and documentation really helps you to set and assess achievable goals and make sure that you're on the right track, not going too fast or pushing things too quickly. So these are my points for creating and following a recovery plan, and I'll go into a bit more generic detail later on as well. But for Drax particularly, the main thing was safety. Hopefully it goes without saying, we are not using any aversive, frightening or painful training methods, or any physical coercion or trapping him, anything like that. I always gave myself enough time if I needed to move him around or let him out, so that I wasn't in a rush and then scaring him with, frantic body language. We very much focus on feelings, not doings. I don't care how he's really behaving in terms of he doesn't need to sit, he doesn't need to lie down, anything like that. I just want him to feel safe and secure. We can get to that at some point if we want to. Providing choice and control, we can leave at any time, building up that trust bank, but also bearing in mind that there usually is a honeymoon period. I can look back at videos from the first week and he's taking chicken out of my hand. And we were thinking, wow, this is great. Maybe it's not going to be as hard as we thought. But actually, that was because he was starving, blooming hungry. And it was worth the risk to go towards a scary lady for the tasty food. After he realised that good meals were going to come every day, that subsided, and it took another year for him to take food out of my hand again. So that's how long it's been taken. Nothing bad happened for him to stop. It's just that he settled in, started to feel safe. So he wasn't then engaging in risky behaviour, which is what happens in the honeymoon period sometimes, and can lull us into a false sense of how comfortable the dog is feeling. Lots of forward planning, and I kind of got this term recharging the brave. So he always and still has access to his room. That's his safe place, and I kind of think of that as his charger. You can get these phone charger hotspots where you put your phone on it and it magically recharges. That's what I think his room is. Because now when we're doing harder things in the garden, like say we're getting used to the harness or the lead, he's always got access to his room, and he might trot back down there, lie down, think about it, and then come back. He's got the choice to re-engage, and giving him that choice means that he is more likely to re-engage. Also, when we think about starting the process of DSCC to something like a harness, this was stage 1. We stayed at this stage for 3 or 4 months, just having the harness in his room. That's what's circled in the green. And I would pick it up, put it down, give him a treat. That was it. Okay, I've got some videos now. So hopefully these are going to be a nice summary of how we went through. There's a home life one, a dog one, and a people one. And I'm just going to let it play. They've got some little subtitles, and hopefully it gives you a flavour of the first 6 months-ish. So this is, we're 18 months in now, so we're a year down the line from where these videos end. So here's the home life stuff. So at this stage, he's still taking stuff back into his safe place. If you watch his body language, he's always kind of leaning back. So this is the toilet area. Again, it's nothing special. It's just an alleyway, but we wouldn't have been able to have him if we had to walk through the lounge to get him out in the garden to go for a pee, or even worse, put him on a lead and walk him down some stairs out for a pee. It just wouldn't have been workable. So this is the larger area. So you go through that yard gate and you get to this little gravel garden. And this was important because it highlights that sort of non-contingency on interactions. He's doing all this on his own. I can add myself into it afterwards. It's not all about me at the moment. It's about his environment. Hopefully just looking at some of the titles of what I've considered a milestone gives you some pointers as to the kind of things you should be looking for as to whether you're succeeding. So yeah, the harness is up in his room and he's able to chew on a slightly easy puzzle toy. I did not expect him to act like an actual puppy, and I left my shoes out, and it then became his toy. But that for me was brilliant. He's found something that smells of me and he's wanted to play with it. This was first tail wag. It should be week 6 there. He loves Gru. Gru loves his sofa. You see the importance of him having access to that recharge zone. Dogs need to approach and avoid. It's how they process things. So often we're taking away that choice to remove, and that's what a dog walk is. You know, one of my bugbears is dog walks that just start by going out the front door and immediately shutting that access back to the safe place. And one thing to monitor is how long is he coming out for and staying? You know, within 5 minutes, how many times has he gone in and out? And is that decreasing? Is he feeling safer at staying in the hallway? This was lovely to start seeing him be like a puppy. But we're looking at week 10 here, you know? This first ever play. And again, I'm not there. He's doing all these things on his own. So if you look at the far end there, that gate is the gravel garden that we showed earlier. And watch his body language here. This is week 12. He's been here 3 months and he's still not 100% sure. Fish is just going to tell him that it is fine. And he goes, oh, okay, maybe it is. Again, shows the importance of having other dogs. So we did this middle bit initially. That's why the other gate is shut, because I really want to watch him and do it safely. This is the top garden now. I mean, obviously it's all secure, but if he does suddenly spook, you know, you've got very limited options as to what you can do. So when he's out, all the gates are open, and I wanted him to have enough safety in his safe space in his room that if something scared him, he's going to run straight back there, which he does. And then we start introducing things like him eating in a different area. This isn't his meal. This is just extra stuff. Again, his meals are not contingent on him having to do anything that he's not comfortable with. You can see he's still taking a mouthful and looking around, but he's not taking a mouthful, walking back into his room and eating it there. So that again is a little behavioural sign that he's starting to feel safe. I love those wobbly bowls, by the way. They're the same company as Licky Mats. They're really good for just dealing and coping with movement as well, which again is a good sort of developmental behavior. And this is what I started doing with the harness. So as you can see, he's already built up some positive relationships with fish and mouse, and they love their harness because it means they go for a lovely walk. Drax isn't sure, as you can tell from his body language, but he's got the choice to leave any time. I keep sessions very short, and they end in everyone going out for a run in the garden. And then sort of 4 months in, he's brave enough to start coming into the lounge. Again, approach, avoid. You can see he's finding this quite difficult. You can see that from the panting. So if I were to then also say, and now you've got to come over and take some food from me, it's just adding too much into the situation. We're just focusing on the little terriers that are having a lovely, lovely time. And then this broke my heart. This was when I knew we were getting somewhere. Relaxed enough. I would probably put money on saying that's the first time he had ever slept upside down, bearing in mind the state he was in where he came from. So then we start adding a new door. I mean, doors are one of the things I've observed that are a real issue for him. We call them the vortex. As you'll notice, I don't tidy my house or my garden for the sake of training videos. You get me as I am, I'm afraid. So don't judge me too much. I am focusing on the dog, not what's around. And again, we're adding in different things. So we've got to a stage where he can wear his harness, and we've built it up in the house. And he's starting to reduce how much he's got to go back into the room when the lounge is on offer for him. So we hang around, but he's still watching to see, is someone going to come? And I honestly think from observing his behavior, that's one of the biggest issues. He's been lured into places using food, and then a door's been shut behind him.